Let's talk about a technology that is, right now, quietly becoming the cheapest way on the entire planet to generate electricity. Yep, we're talking about solar power. It's this incredible story of innovation, but it's also way more complex than you might think. So how did we go from this expensive novelty to being on the brink of a global energy revolution? Let's dive in.
Okay, to really wrap your head around the potential here, let's just start with a truly massive number. 173,000 terawatts. That is the amount of pure, raw power the Earth gets from the sun. To put that into perspective, that's more than 10,000 times the energy that all of humanity uses right now. The potential is, and I mean this literally, astronomical.
And you know, this dream isn't new. This quote? It comes from press reports way back in 1954, when Bell Labs invented the first modern solar cell. Everyone thought it was the dawn of a new era. But, and it was a big but, there was a catch. It was insanely expensive. A single watt of solar power cost about $300. You'd need over $1 million just to power a single home.
Which brings us to the big question, right? If the sun is just blasting us with free energy, and the tech to capture it is getting cheaper by the day, why does it only make up about 3% of the world's electricity? Why isn't it everywhere yet? Well, the answer is this fascinating mix of science, economics, and some really surprising challenges.
To really get to the bottom of it, first, we've got to understand the magic that's happening inside these panels. So how does this thing actually work? It's a brilliant and honestly, a surprisingly elegant process.
It all starts with this little guy, a photon. You could just think of a photon as a tiny particle, a little bullet of light energy, shooting out from the sun and traveling 93 million miles just to get to us.
And that photon's target? A semiconductor, which is usually silicon. And what's amazing about silicon is that it's the second most abundant element on Earth, right after oxygen. So, yeah, we've got plenty of the raw material to work with.
Okay, so here's how it goes down. A solar bullet, our photon, slams into the silicon cell. That impact has just enough energy to knock an electron loose from its atom. Now the cell has this built-in electric field that works like a one-way street, and it forces that loose electron to flow in a specific direction. And that flow of electrons through a circuit is, quite simply, electricity. No moving parts, nothing gets burned up, it's just elegant.
But, like with any major technology, the reality on the ground is a little more complicated than the elegant science. If something sounds too good to be true, there's usually a catch, right? So let's look at the three major reality checks for solar power: its manufacturing footprint, its operational headaches, and its end-of-life problem. The promise we always hear is that solar is 100% clean, green energy. And yeah, when it's generating power, it is emissions-free. But the reality of actually making the panels and then dealing with them afterwards, that tells a much more nuanced story.
So let's start with the big picture on emissions. Making these panels does have a carbon footprint, no doubt, but just look at this comparison. For every kilowatt hour of electricity, solar's responsible for about 40 grams of CO2. Now compare that to natural gas at 500 grams, or coal, which is way, way up there at 1,000 grams. So no, it's not zero, but it is a massive improvement.
The manufacturing process also involves a pretty serious chemical cocktail. I mean, refining the silicon can produce some nasty stuff like silicon tetrachloride, and they use highly corrosive hydrofluoric acid to clean the wafers. And yes, for any Breaking Bad fans out there, it is that hydrofluoric acid. The point is, we don't want to solve our climate problem just to create a hazardous waste problem.
And speaking of waste, what happens when these panels, which last for about 30 years, get to the end of their life? Well, by 2050, the world is projected to have a staggering 78 million metric tons of solar panel waste. That is a mountain of e-waste that we are only just now beginning to figure out how to recycle effectively and profitably.
All right, now for the biggest operational challenge. Solar has always had this one major Achilles heel. It only works when the sun is shining. This inconsistency creates a massive headache for the people running the power grid, a problem that has a very memorable name: the duck curve.
So what is the duck curve? Okay, picture this. In the middle of a sunny day, solar panels are just flooding the grid with cheap, clean power. Demand for traditional energy sources just plummets. But then, as the sun sets, solar production drops to zero. Right when everyone gets home and starts turning on their lights, their TVs, their ovens. Demand for conventional power shoots up like a rocket, and traditional power plants just can't ramp up that fast. This can lead to grid instability and even means we waste solar energy during the day.
And finally, there's just this simple question of physical space. I mean, to power the world, we need a lot of panels. And that brings up the biggest question of all. Where do we actually put them all without eating up precious land we need for things like farming and, nature?
But here's where the story gets really exciting. Because for every single one of these major challenges, human ingenuity is rising to the occasion with some truly brilliant solutions.
Okay, let's look at these. That dreaded duck curve, we're solving it with cheaper, better batteries that can store all that midday solar energy for the evening. That massive waste problem? Innovators are developing profitable ways to recycle them and recover all the valuable materials inside. And the land use issue? This is where it gets really creative with things called agrivoltaics and floatvoltaics.
Let's look closer at these because they're so cool. Agrivoltaics is basically this idea of double cropping our land for both food and energy. You raise panels over fields and they provide shade that actually helps certain crops like tomatoes thrive, while also saving water. Then there's photovoltaics, covering reservoirs with floating solar farms. The water cools the panels, which makes them more efficient, and the panels reduce water evaporation. It's a total win-win.
Okay, so we've looked at the global picture, but what does all of this mean for you? Let's bring it all the way down to the personal level and look at some real-world numbers for a homeowner thinking about solar. What's the actual return on investment?
Let's use a real-world example from a home in sunny Arizona. A 12-kilowatt system with battery backup came with an initial price tag of $48,000. And yeah, that is a number that is going to cause some serious sticker shock for most people.
But, and this is the key, you almost never pay that full price. After applying the federal and state tax credits, plus a local utility rebate for the batteries, the actual out-of-pocket cost for that exact same system dropped all the way down to just under $32,000, a much, much more manageable number.
So, the million-dollar question. How long does it take to pay for itself? Based on saving about $200 a month on the electricity bill, the break-even point for this system is 13.6 years. And that number gets even better, dropping closer to 10 years once you factor in the massive savings from charging an electric vehicle at home for pretty much free.
But, the return on investment isn't just about the numbers. There are huge unseen benefits here. You're protected from rising electricity costs. You have energy independence when the grid goes down. Studies show it actually increases your home's resale value by over 4%. And maybe best of all, there's the simple comfort of just cranking up the air conditioning on a hot day without worrying about the bill.
So what's the takeaway here? Solar is getting cheaper, its side effects are being tackled with really smart solutions, and it's becoming more adaptable to our world's needs every single day. The technology, it seems, is ready to shine. Which leaves us with one final big question to think about. Are we?